Mercedes did not lose their Austrian upgrade because Ferrari shouted the loudest. They lost it because Ferrari found the one question Mercedes could not answer cleanly. Why was Ferrari told to remove a similar idea before the season began, while Mercedes were allowed to race with theirs? That single question has now dragged the Mercedes W17 into one of the most dangerous technical fights of the season. A hidden diffuser upgrade, a jagged edge buried at the rear of the car, has become the center of a political storm. Ferrari pushed. The governing body listened. And now Mercedes may be forced to arrive in Austria without a part they believed was legal. That is why Toto Wolff cannot believe it. Not because Formula One teams never fight over rules. They always do. But because this time, Ferrari may have turned Mercedes' own confidence against them. And if this ruling really bites in Austria, it could do more than remove one upgrade. It could change the momentum of the championship. Subscribe to the channel. To understand why this has hit Mercedes so hard, you have to start with the part most fans never see. Not the front wing. Not the rear wing. Not the engine cover. The diffuser. It sits low at the back of the car, underneath the bodywork, where the air rushing under the floor finally escapes. It is not glamorous. It is not the kind of part that makes a casual viewer stop and stare. But inside a Formula One garage, the diffuser is gold. Because when the air leaves the floor cleanly, the car feels planted. It grips the road. It gives the driver confidence. It allows the tires to work in a calmer way. It lets the car attack corners without sliding around like it is fighting itself. Think of it like running across a wet floor. With the wrong shoes, every step feels uncertain. You slow down. You hold back. You do not trust the ground beneath you. But with the right shoes, suddenly you move with confidence. You still have the same legs, the same floor, the same room, but your entire body feels different because the contact is stable. That is what aerodynamic grip does. It gives the driver trust. And trust becomes speed. Mercedes believed they had found a clever way to improve that trust. Their upgrade was a serrated diffuser extension. In simple words, it was a jagged, sawtooth-style edge along the upper area of the rear diffuser. It was designed to help control the airflow leaving the car's underbody, creating small air structures that could make the rear of the car more stable and efficient. To most people, that sounds tiny. In Formula One, tiny can be everything. A small improvement in rear stability can help a driver brake later. A cleaner airflow path can reduce tire stress. A little more confidence through fast corners can build into a serious advantage across a race distance. And this matters even more under the current ground effect rules, where the floor and diffuser are central to the way the car generates grip. Mercedes did not just add decoration. They added a part in one of the most sensitive areas of the entire car. And Ferrari noticed. But Ferrari did not notice it like a rival seeing something new for the first time. Ferrari noticed it like a team remembering something painful. Because earlier in the year, Ferrari had already explored a similar concept on its own car. Their idea was examined during routine legality checks. And the answer they received was not friendly. They were told to remove it. Not after several races. Not after a famous protest. Before the season had really begun, Ferrari had to take that diffuser concept off the car because it was judged to conflict with the spirit of the regulations. That phrase is where the whole story becomes dangerous. The spirit of the regulations. Not always the clean black and white wording. Not always a simple measurement anyone can see with a ruler. The spirit means what the rules were meant to prevent. It means the governing body believed Ferrari had gone too far, even if the exact argument lived in a technical gray area. So Ferrari removed the part. They carried the cost. They adapted their car. They moved on, at least on the surface. But teams do not forget those moments. Engineers remember what they were told. They remember the shape that failed. They remember the reasoning behind the rejection. They remember where the line seemed to be. And most importantly, they remember when another team appears to stand near that same line without being stopped. That is why the Mercedes upgrade became explosive. Ferrari looked at the W17 and saw a serrated diffuser concept that appeared, in function, uncomfortably close to the type of idea Ferrari had already been forced to abandon. Mercedes' version was not identical. That detail matters. The governing body initially treated the Mercedes design as different enough to be acceptable. Different geometry. Different execution. Different technical details. But Formula One is built on those tiny differences. One curve can be legal. Another can be illegal. One shape can be clever engineering. Another can be a loophole. And Ferrari understood that better than anyone, because Ferrari had already been told no. So the question became impossible to avoid. If Ferrari's version had to go, why could Mercedes keep theirs? That was the beginning of the trap. Ferrari did not need to throw a dramatic formal protest immediately. That would have created a direct legal fight. It would have looked aggressive, maybe desperate, and it would have forced the issue into a public confrontation. Instead, Ferrari chose the smarter path. They asked for clarification. That sounds harmless. It is not. In Formula One, a clarification can be more powerful than a protest. A protest attacks one result, one car, one moment. A clarification attacks the interpretation itself. It forces the governing body to look again at the rule, examine the design, and decide whether the line needs to be redrawn. That is why this move was so dangerous for Mercedes. Ferrari were not just saying, "We think your part is illegal." They were saying, "Explain why this is allowed." And that is a much harder question to escape. Because if the governing body explained that Mercedes were legal, Ferrari could compare that answer with what they had been told earlier. If the governing body explained that Ferrari had been right to question it, Mercedes could lose the part. Either way, Ferrari pulled the issue into the light. And once that happened, Mercedes were no longer just racing Ferrari. They were defending the logic of their own upgrade. This is where Toto Wolff's disbelief starts to make sense. From the Mercedes perspective, the part had passed scrutiny. It was part of a development package introduced at the Canadian Grand Prix. It had been built into the team's technical direction. The car had been developed around it. The engineers had reason to believe it was acceptable. And then, after Ferrari's pressure, reports began to point toward a technical directive that could effectively ban the design, with Austria targeted as the moment of enforcement. That is a brutal shift. 1 week, the part is part of your performance plan. The next, you may have to remove it before a race weekend. That is not just inconvenient. That is chaos disguised as regulation. Because a Formula One car is not a toy where one piece can be pulled off without consequence. It is a chain of connected ideas. The floor affects the diffuser. The diffuser affects rear stability. Rear stability affects tire wear. Tire wear affects strategy. Strategy affects track position. Track position affects the entire race. Take away one hidden aerodynamic element, and the whole balance of the weekend can change. Mercedes would have had to ask uncomfortable questions immediately. Can we run the car safely and competitively without it? Do we have a replacement part ready? Does the rear of the car lose stability? Do the drivers need a different setup? Do we carry more wing and sacrifice straight-line speed? Do we risk tire degradation becoming worse? None of those questions are comfortable days before Austria. Especially when the team's trucks and spare components had reportedly already left the factory. That detail matters because Formula One development is planned with obsessive precision. Parts are designed, manufactured, tested, packed, and moved on a schedule. A late regulation change can throw that schedule into panic. Not dramatic panic. Not people running around screaming. The real kind. Engineers staying awake too late. Team managers checking whether replacement pieces exist. Drivers preparing for a car that might feel different from the one they expected. Senior figures trying to negotiate time, delay enforcement, or protect the weekend from becoming a disaster. That is what panic looks like at the front of Formula One. Quiet, expensive, technical, and very real. Mercedes reportedly pushed for the clarification to take effect at the British Grand Prix instead of Austria. That would have given them more time, more preparation, more chance to create a clean replacement. But Ferrari's pressure had already done damage. Because even asking for a delay sends a message. It tells the paddock the part matters. It tells rivals Mercedes do not want to lose it quickly. It tells Ferrari the question hit the right place. And in a championship fight, perception can become pressure before the stopwatch even starts. This is the part that makes the story bigger than a single upgrade. Mercedes entered this phase of the season as the dominant team. The W17 had been the benchmark. It had won repeatedly. It had looked balanced, fast, and composed while others were still trying to understand their own cars. Kimi Antonelli had become a central figure in that Mercedes surge. George Russell had kept Mercedes firmly in the fight. The team looked like it had built the most complete package under the new rules. But dominance in Formula One is never just about having a fast car. It is about keeping the car legally protected. It is about defending every advantage. It is about making rivals believe they are chasing something stable. Ferrari challenged that stability. And that is why this matters so much. Before the diffuser controversy, Mercedes were the team everyone else had to catch on track. After Ferrari's move, Mercedes became the team being questioned off track. That changes the atmosphere. A fast car feels different when rivals are studying every edge of it. A confident team feels different when the governing body is preparing letters about its components. A team principal feels different when he has to defend not just performance, but process. And Wolff already had reasons to be frustrated with the governing body. The season had not been calm for Mercedes. At Monaco, George Russell was caught in a penalty controversy that Mercedes believed had cost him heavily. Russell received a time penalty, then a drive-through penalty after the original penalty was not served, creating a painful chain reaction. Mercedes felt the situation had been handled unfairly, but the rules left them with almost no realistic path to overturn the damage. That mattered emotionally. Because by the time the diffuser story arrived, Mercedes were not dealing with a first irritation. They were dealing with another chapter in a season where the governing body had already become a source of tension. Then came the technical fight. Then came Ferrari's clarification request. Then came the possibility of an Austrian ban. For Wolff, this would not feel like one isolated problem. It would feel like pressure building from every side. And Ferrari knew exactly when to apply it. The timing before Austria was not random. The Austrian Grand Prix is a dangerous place to arrive with uncertainty. The lap is short. The margins are tight. Drivers need confidence quickly. Teams do not have endless time to hide a balance problem. If the car is unsettled, the timing screens can expose it brutally. A small rear-end weakness can become visible fast. A setup compromise can cost qualifying position. A tire problem can turn a race from attack to survival. That is why removing a diffuser element before Austria could hurt more than the part itself suggests. Mercedes might still have a strong car. They might still be fast. But Formula One is not only about being fast in theory. It is about being fast with confidence, on that circuit, on that weekend, under that pressure. Ferrari's move attacked that confidence. And it came right after Ferrari had changed the emotional direction of its own season. Barcelona was the turning point. Lewis Hamilton won for Ferrari. His first Formula One victory with the Scuderia. A massive moment, not only for Hamilton, but for the entire Ferrari project. That win told Ferrari something important. Mercedes could be beaten. The gap was not untouchable. The season was not finished. And once a team believes the leader can be reached, every detail on the leader's car becomes a target. The diffuser was one of those details. But it was not just any detail. It was connected to Ferrari's own history. That made the attack sharper. It gave Ferrari moral weight. It allowed them to say, we were stopped in this area, so the same standard must apply now. That is a powerful argument. Not because it proves Mercedes deliberately broke anything, but because it pressures the governing body to avoid looking inconsistent. No regulator wants the appearance that one team got a stricter answer than another. No governing body wants the paddock to believe legality depends on timing, relationship, or interpretation management. Ferrari understood that weakness. They pushed into it. And that is why the result looked like a political victory. Because Ferrari did not only ask whether Mercedes had crossed the line. Ferrari asked whether the line itself had been drawn fairly. That is far more dangerous. A simple illegal part can be removed and forgotten. A fairness question can infect the whole championship. If Mercedes were allowed to run a concept Ferrari had been denied, then Ferrari could argue they had lost performance unfairly from the beginning. If Mercedes were forced to remove it, Mercedes could argue they had been punished after following the process. There was no painless answer. Someone had to be angry. This time, it was Mercedes. But here is what makes Ferrari's move even colder. Ferrari were not simply trying to destroy the concept altogether. After their own winter setback, they learned from the clarification process. They developed their own legal interpretation of the serrated diffuser idea. They carried that thinking into their upgrade direction. So Ferrari were not just saying, nobody should use this. They were saying, the line must be drawn in a way that our interpretation survives and Mercedes' interpretation does not. That is extremely difficult. And extremely clever. Because in Formula One, the best political moves do not simply block a rival. They also protect your own path forward. Ferrari had been hurt by the rules, then used that pain as data. They understood what had failed. They studied what Mercedes had managed to pass. They used the governing body's explanations to map the legal edge. Then they pushed for that edge to move against Mercedes.